Welcome to the editing room. I'm Jules, and in today's video, I'll be talking about why I believe the CV is dead. And if you're a portfolio careerist and still using it as a frame of reference, that I think it can be really detrimental to growing your income streams. I built my portfolio career 4 years before resigning, so my mode of operating was build first, test the income streams, and make sure that I had a good source of income coming in before I resigned from my C-suite role. And now I predominantly help other women to launch their portfolio careers and transition from the corporate world into essentially becoming a one-person business. And where I see a lot of people getting stuck is when someone leaves corporate, and this was me included, updates their CV, thinking that's still the source of truth, and then sending it out to their network, expecting to get a lot of leads. But one of two things happens: nothing at all. There are no bites and no leads. Or on the opposite side of things, there are opportunities coming in, but they're all the wrong opportunities. And I call this bum on seat energy. So essentially it feels like you're taking a step backward. You're getting really lower value contracts. It's like you're an employee with just you've just got your bum on the seat working within the team. Hence the analogy. This is a very popular term in Australia. And I know all about this because when I left my executive role, I did exactly the same thing. I wasn't really taught to work in this solopreneur world. I knew about entrepreneurship. I worked with a lot of startups, but actually being a one-person business and translating your corporate context into becoming a portfolio careerist is a whole set of different rules, which I had to learn, I'd say, the hard way. And so that's why I'm starting this video, because I want to help others. I want to communicate the details, like the behind the scenes of how do you get to certain places, like how do people communicate the way they do, and how do they get work and capture people's attention. The devil is in the detail, and it takes a lot of what I call like excavation work. Okay, I wanted to jump in and provide a little bit more context around my story and actually the process that I went through and how I arrived here today having this conversation with you. If you're a aspiring portfolio career, so if you're still in corporate and you're looking to leave, or in your first 6 to 12 months of being a portfolio careerist, and all that means is monetizing your skill set across multiple income streams. That could be through consulting, coaching, strategic advisory, whatever that looks like for you. Now, when I decided I was really over the corporate world, and I'm like, okay, how does one monetize their skill set? Like, what's the first thing I have to do? I'd say I was really institutionalized. I was in the traditional context of working and getting a monthly salary since 2005. So I was like nearly 20 years into the game when I started really thinking I wanted something different. And so the first thing I did, which is probably what a lot of you guys do, is I updated my CV. I thought that's the core tool that I can have a discussion with someone so they can see the breadth of my expertise and my titles and the companies I work for, blah, 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 right? And it was really, at the time, if I think about it, the only document or the only way I knew how to describe my professional experience other than my LinkedIn bio. So what I did was I thought I had a pretty healthy network. So I thought I'm just going to send it out to everyone, tell them that I'm looking for this shape of work. And basically I just pointed to the same work I was doing within my corporate job. What proceeded to happen were the wrong conversations, right? So I got offered similar shaped in-house roles, fixed contract roles that felt like I was an employee and not a strategic partner, and not at all what I was envisaging being this, not even fractional, but this strategic advisor to organizations. But all of this that was going on in my head was not at all demonstrated through my actions or what I was putting out to my network. I was simply sending them a CV and saying, hey, if you've got any portfolio career work, could you, basically I think I said something like that, something really silly. And come to think of it, when I think back now, I'm like, of course, no one knew what I wanted because I hadn't even really articulated what I wanted. So after a lot of failed attempts of me having conversations with the same sort of people offering me the same types of opportunities, I thought, you know what? I've got this wrong. My positioning is wrong. I need some support. So I did what most of us do. I went online and I sought expertise and guidance from all of the online gurus and read a ton of advice. And the advice was good, right? I'm not saying it wasn't good advice. It's a lot of the advice I give today because it's true, but in order for you to get to that point, there's a lot that you have to do. Now, let me explain. The advice was, and you would have heard this, lead with the transformation. Talk about your outcomes. And I'm going to say the same thing to you because this is a really important thing. You want to lead with your transformation. You want to talk about the outcomes. You want to talk about the results you delivered and the value. That is the most important component, the value you delivered. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, I wasn't a junior burger, right? Like I'd been in senior roles. I was like in executive positions and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what do you mean lead with the transformation? Like, how am I doing this? Like, how am I repositioning myself? And I tried to rewrite my positioning. I really did. And I ended up with these vague vanilla statements about who I was and what I could do. But if I'm being honest, it ended up being really vague and more like a LinkedIn summary in your bio versus this really impactful statement of the value I can deliver if you're to work with me. And I want to say again, the advice wasn't wrong. It was good advice. It's just I didn't have the frame of reference or the context in which I could execute it. And I think a lot of corporate folks are in the same boat in terms of really understanding conceptually, oh, I have to write about this transformation and be more specific and really boil down what I can do. But we've always looked through things as an employee, and the way that we've communicated ourselves professionally is through the CV as an artifact. And what I realized was I was still seeing myself through the lens of the CV, right? That's how I viewed my professional experience. And the CV, as we all know, it's organized around job titles and responsibilities. And so that's how I saw myself. And actually, it wasn't just a document to me, it was literally the way I communicated everything about my professional experience. So whenever someone asked me to talk about, you know, give me a snapshot of what you've done and who you've helped, I was basically reciting my CV. And we were kind of trained to do that, especially when you go for interviews. And what I realized is that you can't write transformational language and you can't talk about the value that you've driven through the lens of responsibilities, or I've managed 10 people, or a job title. And so you don't actually need to rewrite your CV. You need a completely new lens for which you view your professional experience. And hence why I think the CV is dead, because everyone's moving towards this new way of working. And so this list of what we've done in a timeline is going to be a thing of the past. Okay, so let's move on to what actually wins work. And what I'm going to share with you right now is going to surprise exactly no one. What we do know is that 72% of portfolio career work comes through your networks, right? So we've heard it before. Your network equals your net worth. Yes, it sounds gross. Yes, it sounds bro-ish. But it's true, right? It's not from job boards, it's not from applications, and it's definitely not from any dodgy CV. It is all about relationships and referrals, and even more so in today's market. And so we know this, we know your network matters, but I've always known this, and I bet you know this too, but when someone says to you, oh, you've got to manage your network, or whenever they reference your network, I just would cringe, because I'm like, I know I have to manage my network, but what do you mean when you say network versus what the shape of what it means to me when I think about my network? What I realized after speaking to a lot of people who I had sent and had conversations with, and it really hadn't gone anywhere, what I learned is that for someone to refer you, they need to really succinctly understand what problem you solve. Right? So if they're speaking to someone in their network and they're like, oh, I'm really looking for someone senior who can activate a new revenue line in my business. They need to be able to work with a large corporate, but also act like an innovator. Someone in my network, if I'm doing the right thing, would be like, that's Julie. You need to speak to Julie. Like, she can do this for you. This is a part of her secret sauce. But when I was going out to my connections, I wasn't saying anything like that. If they were saying, like, what's your one-liner? I would be like, well, I was a VP at this private equity firm, and like, no one gives a shit, right? Like, none of that matters. And so what I realized is no one was referring me is because they didn't have the language or the one-liner or really understood what problems I solved. And I want you to do a quick exercise now for me to really hammer this point home. So I want you to think about when someone's asked you, do you know someone with X skills, right? You innately, people want to help people. We want to feel like, you know what, we have all of these people in our network and we can connect them. People love doing that. It's a great feeling. It's a great skill. You get lots of kudos if you can connect people and solve people's problems and all of the things. And if someone asks you, like, do you know someone who can help me with X? I bet you're scrolling the names in your head and you're thinking, oh, I know this person, but she used to be in marketing and I think she's in consulting now, but I'm not exactly sure what she does. And that's not working for you, right? So if you're that person in marketing who's gone into consulting, you haven't been able to clearly articulate what you're doing, and that person can't refer you. And I bet you've been in that situation before where you really wanted to refer someone and you really wanted to help someone, but you just don't know what to say. And you don't want to ruin your own reputation by recommending someone who doesn't have the right skill set. Do you know what I mean? Have you been in this situation? I know I have, and I bet I've put other people in that situation when they've been real supporters of mine, but I haven't clearly communicated what I do, so they couldn't recommend me. So here what I'm breaking down is the gap, right? And it's not about your capability. It's not about your experience. It's all about the language we're using in order to communicate what we do. And we want to give really solid, specific examples to people. And what this whole video is about is that you can't do that work by staring harder at your CV, rewriting your CV. Believe me, I've tried. It's a completely new document. When I stopped trying to rewrite my CV and started mapping out actually everything I did, this is when my opportunities increased and literally everything changed for me. And by this process of me working through this, I ended up building this framework, and I call it the Honeycomb Framework. And I'm going to go through what that all means and the different components, so you can kind of start to build this picture in your head, the steps that you need to take before you're actually writing your positioning statement. What this Honeycomb Framework does, it maps out your capabilities across 6 separate domains. And let me talk you through each domain because you're going to be familiar with a few of them. And I bet a few others you just completely discounted because you thought, oh, that's just something I do every day. That's not even a skill. Let me tell you, you need to think about it. Okay, so let's start with the first domain. Domain 1 is all about industry expertise. So this is something you, being in the corporate world and working professionally, you'll know really well. So this is about the sectors you know, insider knowledge, like how the industry actually works, the problems you've seen and solved 100 times by being in that industry. This could be from a regulatory context. For example, for me, I had 3 big industries that I played within, predominantly healthcare, health tech, media, and then climate. And so I really understood by working within those 3 industries quite deep, the different players and the dynamics by working within those industries. So I want you to think about what that is for you. And why this matters is because I call this your unfair advantage, right? You speak the language. If you meet someone within that industry, you already know the different lingo, particularly if you've worked in insurance or in the fintech world. They have all of these acronyms and different ways of seeing the world, particularly from a regulatory point of view. So you don't really need any onboarding. And that's something that companies love. They love when you can hit the ground running. I know a very dicky corporate term, but you know what? They use it a lot. And this is what I've seen that most people miss. They undervalue their industry knowledge because it feels so obvious. They're like, of course I know this. I've been in the healthcare industry for 15 years. I did this a lot. Like, I undervalued all of my healthcare experience. You might say things like, everyone knows this, but believe me, they don't. And what problems you can spot in 5 minutes would take an outsider potentially 5 or 6 months. So don't discount that insider knowledge that you ascertain and have. I want you to think about that and write it down. The second domain is functional capabilities. So this is, you could be in corporate strategy, operations, marketing, finance, HR, project management. That's the stuff you can actually do. So that's the function that you held within a traditional corporate context. And this is what most people lead with, right? When they're talking about their experience, right? And I totally understand it. So you're like, well, I'm a project manager because that was the function that you played. And what I would say here is that this is really table stakes at the moment. Everyone coming out of corporate has both industry and functional capabilities. This is not your unique selling point. The third domain where I think things start getting a little bit interesting is starting to think about how you transfer what you know. So what I mean by this is, if you're going to go in to be a portfolio careerist, like, how are you transferring that knowledge? Is it through consulting? Is it coaching, mentoring, facilitation, training? Is it through speaking, fractional leadership, advisory? Like, how are you delivering the transfer of your knowledge? And I want you to think about that, because everyone just goes to like, oh, I'm going to be a coach or I'm going to be a consultant. Think about, like, is that the best mode for you and the way you want to work? And we're going to get to your strengths in terms of your human skills and what lights you up in a moment. And this is where human design links, but I'm going to just pause it here for now. And why I think this is really important, because as a portfolio careerist, like, your income streams come from your delivery mode. And we want to get quite clear about the makeup of our portfolio and the delivery modes that sit within it. And inside corporate, the delivery mode was decided for you, right? They owned your time. They told you where to be, how to show up. They onboarded you. You were an employee. But in the outside world, you choose. And although that can feel really exciting and freeing, it also can be debilitating, because you're like, Jesus, what do I choose? How do I know if I like this? This is why I think it's really important to spend some time on, like, how do I want to transfer this knowledge? What is that? How can I start testing some of these different delivery modes? And what would suit me the best? Like, what is the best way to deliver my work? You also want to think about things like, do you want to be embedded into the team 3 days a week? Or do you want to come in, solve a problem, and then leave? Like, how do you want to deliver your work? So I'm going to really hammer this home, because a lot of people don't think about this when they're transitioning from corporate to portfolio careers. They just basically replicate their corporate career, but go on in a contract basis. And that's not what we want to do. We really want to think about, how do I want to have a work life that's really aligned to what lights me up? Domain 4 is all around commercial acumen. And so what is commercial acumen in this context? It is about, can you sell what you do? Can you price it? Do you know how to price your services? Can you write a proposal that actually lands? Can you manage a sales pipeline? Can you have a conversation with a client about money? Do you know how to market your services? Inside corporate, someone else brought all of this to your desk, right? You had all of the systems around you in order to get your work done. It was kind of like invisible work that just happened. In the outside world, when you're a portfolio careerist, you are the sales and marketing machine. You do manage the pipeline. So what I want to ask you here before we move on is, when was the last time you priced your own work? So if you're working in a corporate context, are you pricing your work? Do you ever think about how much your work would cost? Have you wrote out your own proposal of work? Or do you never have to think about any of that stuff? Have you ever had to follow up on a lead? Or is that something you just manage stakeholders within a corporate environment? And so if the answer is not lately or never, then I would say that this domain, this capability set, is at the moment in its dark state, and we would have to work to light it up. And that's not a problem, right? Like, this is not a problem, but it is a non-negotiable to start working on these skills if you want a portfolio career that actually pays. And I have to say, like, this is something I really had to learn, although I was really great at doing internal selling, really great at stakeholder management. As I said, I managed startup teams, I understood about raising money, etc. But I was always supported by a system, and it's very different when you're on your own doing it for you. Domain 5 is called human skills, and this is something that most of us don't think about. It's our natural strengths, it's our humanness, and we just think that's not something special, that's not a skill. Actually, as we've seen in the world of AI, these human-shaped skills are going to go up even more in currency as AI optimizes in the background. So I'm talking about things like discernment, knowing what matters and what doesn't. Influence, getting people to move without authority. That's really important as a portfolio careerist. You know, you're that advisor, you're guiding. Presence, how you show up in the room and guide people. Reading the room and knowing what's not being said. Such an important skill when you're working with a team, and especially as a portfolio careerist, if you're going in for a short amount of time to have a big impact, these skills are incredibly important to have sharpened. And also being able to make a call when data is incomplete. So having the instinct and pulling on your past experience to be able to say, you listen, from what I understand from my corporate experience or my list of projects that I've executed, I know this is the best way forward, even when you don't have perfect data. These are the types of skills that are going to make you AI proof. So we've heard a lot about humanness, judgment, discernment. This is this section really breaking down with examples of like, okay, so where have I demonstrated judgment? Where have I demonstrated presence and influence in different parts to get projects done or to make an impact? And this is the domain. I really leverage your human design as a strength finder, as a way to name what you naturally do and give you language, very powerful language for that. And so your design communicates your strengths that you've probably been taking for granted, and we will draw light on that. So that's something else to consider. If you've ever looked into your human design, I advise you look into your something called channels and gates, because that's where it holds a lot of your strengths. And the final domain will be a surprise to no one, but I think it's important to include, and it's called AI fluency. So this is about how you can work with machines. Can you direct them? Can you use them to multiply your impact? So this is the whole point about understanding where to apply agents, how to optimize workflows, how to optimize your work. Especially this is like a power trick for portfolio careerists, where in the past you may have only been able to take on 2 clients, but now with supporting streamlined AI operations, you might be able to take on 5 or 7. And I would say that really being AI literate and understanding how the different tools work, how the large language models work, AI fluent is going to become a non-negotiable. And at the moment, it can be quite an edge, being able to talk in a way that really demonstrates you understand how to apply and use these systems to support your clients. So that was an overview of the 6 domains. And what I want to land here is that your CV really only captures in fullness 2 of them. And that is your industry you've worked in and the function that you worked in. So it could be, the industry might be healthcare and the function is you're a marketing manager. So it's your title and industry. And everyone coming out of corporate right now has those, right? If that's all you're leading with, then you're going to look like everyone else and really blend into the sea of these corporate professionals looking to do alternative work. Honeycomb Framework, so really looking across those 6 domains, shows you that full picture of the strengths you have and which ones you can draw from. But here's the fun part. Well, I think it's the fun part. Mapping out each of the domains and just listing your strengths and the skills that you have under each isn't enough. The next step is really understanding, like, well, what do I do with all of it? Do I build income streams around all of these? And what I say to my clients at this point is not everything is worth building on, right? Some of your strengths that you're excited about, that you'll lead with, And some you'll drop entirely. They're the parts of your work and your past career that you just hated. You could do, but you just don't want to do anymore. And they're the parts that will drop entirely. So how do you know the difference? Like, how do you know what to keep and what to drop? For each skill, you want to ask yourself a couple of questions. Is this a lit cell or is this a dark cell? A lit cell has 3 components: evidence, energy, and market demand. In evidence, this is where you have actual outcomes and proof you've delivered this. Under the energy component, this is the work that lights you up. For me, anything that's got to do with growth or new growth really lights me up. So I'm really great in the growth building phase of your business. I hate mature operations. They just make it's so boring. But I love when things are at the beginning and we're looking for product market fit. I can prove I've delivered in that stage, that under that skill. And it lights me up. I'm just like, oh my God, I love this work. I do it for businesses and now I do it also for individuals. And then finally, market demand. I had to figure out, well, I have evidence of being able to grow businesses. The work really lights me up. So the energy is there, but is there market demand? Because if there's no market demand and no one's going to pay for it, then it's just a hobby. Right? And so I had to really think about, will people pay for this on the outside? Not I'm inside a corporate and they're going to pay me anyway, but is someone going to actually hire me for this specific skill set? I have evidence, I have energy for it, and there's absolutely market demand. Let's do a little exercise right now. I want you to think about a skill that you're known for, something that you're really good at. People come to you for it. And now I want you to ask yourself, do I have energy for this? Not, am I good at it? But do I want to still be doing this in 3 years, 5 years? And I want you to notice if you feel expanded or contracted. So I want you to ask yourself this question. Does it light me up or does it drain me? So when I think about doing this work, do I feel really like, oh my gosh, yes? Or is it like, no, I don't want to do that. The last 5 or 6 years, I've had the opportunity to work with so many incredible women and build their portfolio careers, but a lot of them have come to me and they've actually built their portfolios around what I call like the dark cells. They're good at the work, so they lead with it because that's what they've always done in corporate. They get work doing it, and then 12 months down the track, they're exhausted and they're burnt out and they're wondering why this feels just as depleting as the corporate job they left. So they ended up not escaping burnout. They just rebuilt it under a new banner. This is my point. Your CV can't show you this, right? It can't tell you that this shape work is going to deplete you. It's exactly what you were doing before, just wrapped up in a new dress. Your CV only knows what you've done. It doesn't know what sustains you. And that's why this is such an important lens. This work not only shows you what you're incredibly good at, your strengths are across 6 domains, it doesn't just tell you what work lights you up and feels expansive. It also demonstrates or sheds light on any of the work that you have 0 energy for. It also shows you which of the cells that you need to build on, need to grow in that capability if you want to do this work. So we've gone through the first step, really understanding the different domains, the skill sets, the strengths, and now we're ready to move the next step in understanding, okay, well, if I don't summarize all that I've learned in a CV format, what am I actually using? Do I use the Honeycomb Framework? Do I talk to that? And my answer to this is no. The Honeycomb Framework and that whole process is for you. It's a diagnostic tool. You need something you can give people, like a 1-pager about what you do and why it matters. And I call this the Portfolio Impact Brief. I was really inspired, and I always have been inspired, by creative professionals who share their portfolio. And it demonstrates the different projects and creative work that they have executed in the past. And I've always thought this is a much better illustration and demonstration of the type of work they can do versus what we give out, which is just words on a page in chronological order, or reverse chronological order of the job titles we've held. So that's what this has been the real inspiration for the Portfolio Impact Brief. And almost nothing on it would be on a traditional CV, maybe your name. And it answers one question. What can you do for someone right now? What value do you actually deliver and what problems do you solve? Let me give you an example of CV language, so the traditional language versus portfolio brief language. So CV language sounds like this. Senior Marketing Director, 15 years B2B tech, led teams of 20, managed $5 million budgets, responsible for brand strategy, demand generation, customer acquisition. So what does that tell you? They did marketing and tech for a while, right? Here's what a portfolio impact statement sounds like. I help B2B tech companies who've nailed product market fit, but are bleeding money on paid acquisition. I rebuild their demand engine to cut cost of customer acquisition by 30 to 50% within 2 quarters. So one says where you've been, your CV example, and the other concisely says what problem you solve and what happens when you solve it. And that's a transformation language, people. I've finally gotten here. This is what the transformation language everyone talks about. But can you see why it is that you need to do this excavation before you can land that? Because if you don't really understand your strengths in the process and the different domains where you're really strong in, it's so incredibly difficult to get from the CV language to the impact state language, like within 5 minutes when someone says, oh, you just have to write a transformational statement. Easier said than done. There's an excavation process, and it's a deep inquiry about who you are and what you have in your toolkit and the different things you know about yourself that you probably haven't really thought about ever or in a long time. And so that's why the Honeycomb Framework comes first, because you have to see what you've got before you can explain it. And when I wrote my first one, I'd realized I'd been underselling myself for years. And it wasn't about not having the confidence. It was just I had the wrong lens. Before I finish this video, I wanted to do a quick exercise with you. So if you want to play along, let's have some fun. So I want you to look at your CV. So you can hit pause and go grab the latest version of your CV. And I want you to ask yourself, how many outcomes are actually on it? Not responsibilities, outcomes. And what portion of the outcomes that you do have take up your CV real estate? Now, I want you to also think about what's changed because you were there. And what I mean by that is, what's that outcome that you drove towards that made an improvement for the organization, a return on investment, whatever that was? Because most people can't find even 3 across their whole CV with decades of experience. And that's the gap. Like I said before, this document is full of where you've been and has nothing about what you deliver. And if a portfolio career right now feels harder than you expected, conversations feel like they're going nowhere, and your current CV frame of reference isn't opening doors, this is why. And no one really explains the devil in the detail. I only know this because I've lived it and I support others through it. That's it for this week's episode of The Editing Room. Next week, I'll be going through something called career archaeology. So we'll be doing further excavation about which skills are yours versus what stayed behind at the organization when you left. And if this landed, I would absolutely love if you could like or subscribe. And if you thought, I want to actually build this and do this work, I'm opening up a portfolio design beta in February. You won't just be participants. This is a brand new product. I'm really looking for co-creators and people interested in doing this deep, detailed work. There's a link in the description, and I'm Jules, and I'll see you next Tuesday.